I should have brought my Tibetan singing bowl. That's what I do for my kids. They were Tibetan singing bowl. Okay. All right. So I hope you generated some ideas. This seems like a fairly obvious one, but you'd be surprised how few kids have used technology to conduct in-depth background research or to collaborate with other people or to look at what other people have done in a field before. So they've used the tools around it, they've done some basic web searches and things like that, but they really haven't used it in a meaningful information gathering function. So even something this simple is a way that we can incorporate technology. Now I used to be fairly radical on this idea, and I would say, oh, just writing that they're doing internet research in your lesson plan is not a sufficient use of technology. And I very much backed off of that opinion as I sat and watched kids using the tools, and they're not using them even in this stage very effectively. So this is something we can help them with and work with them on. And it doesn't seem like it's all that creative to do research, but it inspires the creativity. It's that first necessary step.
And really, to inspire the creativity has to do with the questions that are presented in math.
Yes.
And actually learning how to formulate questions is a really important skill that I think doesn't get addressed enough in teacher education.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Excellent. Let's have a whole lesson on the Socratic seminar long. Okay. All right. So some ideas that I have. We've got unprecedented access to resources. So if we're limiting to our kids to what's in the library, then we are really doing them a disservice. Now I love books. I love some books. But there are so many resources out there that we could be utilizing. Unprecedented access to collaborative partners. I heard you guys talking about Skype up here.
Yeah.
Right? We can Skype, if we're doing a country report, we can literally Skype with a kid from that country. If we're doing research on our favorite author, we can actually Skype with that author. So there's so many opportunities with the technologies that we have there. This is another thing that I kind of stole from Rex the other day when we were working together on that panel. He said, the white matter of our brains are like a cable to the internet. You become more powerful when you can connect to other computers. And what was funny was he was talking about making connections within the brain. But of course, I was immediately like, oh yes, we can get online and make connections very literally that we could not have made previously. And so this is something we've got to model for our kids and teach them how to use these collaborative tools. Very seldom have they used Facebook to collaborate on something, but they can. Now, one other thing that technology allows us to do is to very easily discover what other people have done. So if we're thinking of creating an invention, or we're thinking of doing a science project, or whatever it may be, it's much easier to go and see, oh, somebody's already done that. Which really is exciting because we can extend the boundaries now of creativity. We're regarding new things, and we can see that it's different from what others have done before. All right, so I've lumped the two middle ones, incubation and inspiration. Incubation is defined as this downtime, a period when things can rumble around in your head, you can make connections, and it's often happening in the subconscious or unconscious mind. That's a funny word, not unconscious, subconscious, okay. Inspiration comes when a solution is recognized in the conscious mind, so it makes that leap from rumbling around to being that aha moment, right? Both of these require time and space. So, based on what we discussed earlier, do you see a problem? I'm going to go ahead and skip this discussion because I think it's so blatantly obvious that I don't think we need it. We're saying use technology, use technology, use technology, but the big middle component of creativity requires time and space. to one side, we've got the abuse of technology. To the other side, we've got a lack of resources. And so we're following this very narrow path in which we're saying, well, we want the tech. It helps us to discover, but it doesn't give us freedom and space. All right, so my thoughts on this, yes, we are seeing a negative impact of technology in the incubation and inspiration phases. So we can have kids do research till the cows come home. But if they're then going home and having continuous partial attention with all of their devices, there's no incubation. It's not happening. And we can actually see that. We see less reflective capability. For example, when you ask kids to think about how they feel about things, or to reflect on why something might have happened and what they could have done differently, or any number of reflective exercises, they struggle with them because that requires quiet and it requires sincere and deep thought, which you cannot do if you're dividing your attention. So, technology has to be tempered. Now I have some things up here with meditation, with nature, with interpersonal relationships, with play. Now, we, of course, could argue that we can play on technology, but this is a different kind of play. That play where you let all of the inhibitions go and just enjoy, and that's not happening. Please.
So in technology, it really utilizes the students' executive functions, correct?
It depends on the technology that we're using. So we're going to, there are a couple, actually I have this bullet point. Look, I'll pay you later. Okay, all right. So there's a limited number of technologies that actually can help to build these reflective capabilities. Oh, that's me, not reading. Okay. All of a sudden I was hearing myself. Okay. The problem is that if the device is on, most likely I have multiple windows open. That's where our struggle is here. Can you think of some technologies that could actually facilitate the incubation, brainstorming, etc. period? The reflective period. Turn to your neighbor for a minute. Are there technologies you can think of that can actually facilitate this stuff? You all are coming up with the coolest stuff that I had not thought of. So I'm hearing music. I'm hearing noise canceling headphones. I'm hearing, oh, there's some other Okay, photography, nature photography we're talking about up here. We're talking about brain training days. You guys are coming up with crazy stuff. Okay. All right, so there are some technologies here, and sometimes we all think about them as such because they've become so ubiquitous. But a lot of you, I heard a lot of you talking about listening to music. and how that can be this space that you can move into where you're kind of soothed and you can let everything go and you can just be in a creative moment.
They're starting to use something called pink noise. And so we're seeing that that's being used a lot more in schools to block out other noises.
Yeah, why don't we summarize it for everyone so they know what that is?
I'm not sure if I can explain it. It essentially mimics a conversation so that it absorbs the sounds of the conversation so that you can't focus on them. So like I can hear people back there whispering, but the pink noise would emulate that so that you're so used to it that you can't narrow it out.
Exactly.
Is that a pretty good description?
Yeah, our brains are very, very adept at kind of tuning out all of the conversations around us to focus in on things. So it's quite lovely, yeah. And nothing's really comprehensible, so it's just this lovely improvement. Yeah, yeah. Excellent. Okay, I heard brain training games, even just to get our working memories and ideas flowing and things like that. I heard noise can't forget, but I love that one because it's a hard technology, so sometimes we don't think of that, right? There are apps for guided meditation that we can use, and there are podcasts, some great ones out of Stanford, by the way, that are mindfulness meditation, guided meditations that are fantastic. So there are a lot of things here that could actually help us. I'm going to throw blogging on the table here as well. I know a lot of you are actually afraid. See, I'm going to redeem myself on the writing front. Okay? I know a lot of us are afraid that kids are losing their writing skills. Okay? Blogging is the one tech we found that actually improves writing skill because it's live online, and so there's a certain impetus, a certain responsibility to write a little better. And they can go back and revise and whatnot. Then they can share it with people and everything. So people who use blogging regularly as a part of an educational system, it actually can help improve writing. But this is a good reflective space. So again, it starts with the questions we're asking. And if we're asking some deep probing questions and application questions, then it starts getting them thinking. And now we've got a venue for them to write it out, right? Please.
I just want to add a little caveat to that. I think it improves personal narrative writing.
Okay.
But there are other types of writing
Good
across
point.
the country that's really hurting.
Good point.
Expository,
Very true.
they're not getting it.
Good.
So,
Good. Thank you for clarifying that point. All right, just a moment to talk about play. I mean, again, as part of this tightrope, and what we'll end up seeing in this, by the end of this session, is that there's a time for tech and there's a time to get as far away from it as you possibly can. Play, when we let everything go, it down-regulates those frontal lobes, so they're not in charge, right? And that gets rid of those inhibitory effects. So we really need playfulness in every stage. In idea generation, we need to teach our kids how to brainstorm, truly brainstorm. A lot of kids don't know how to do that. They come up with 3 ideas that they think are plausible. No, I want 84 ideas, most of which are not plausible. Be playful with it. And there are texts that we can use for this. There are some great mind and concept mapping tools out there, both free and paid, app-based or platform-based or personal computer-based that kids can use. There are also collaborative ones. So for example, there's a tool called Webspiration that allows, basically you could put the whole class together if you wanted to, making the same digital concept map and brainstorming ideas all over the place and they could work on it together.
Was that again?
Webspiration. But there are a lot of concept mapping tools. That's just one with which I've done some work.
So, sorry, I think I missed the very first sentence of the slide. Because this goes back to one of the first things you mentioned at the very beginning about how frontal lobe matters decreasing. Are you saying that to have play increase, you need to downregulate frontal lobe development, or am I completely confused?
No, engaging in play kind of shuts off temporarily the frontal lobe involvement so that we can be more open to ideas.
Because you're not restricted by saying this is the decision you have to make.
Yeah, so as Rexion was talking about, we need that kind of exchange between them, between the frontal lobes, the critical thinking and all of that stuff, and the letting go and letting ideas flow. And so this is a period at which we want to kind of turn off the inhibitions and play and let things come. So if we play, this will happen. We need to let them play with things. My favorite discussion I do all year with my future high school teachers is when we build neurons out of marshmallows and pretzel sticks. Oh, it's awesome. And when they understand how the neurons work. Physical things, most definitely. Bring physical things in for them to play with. We can also have them play online in gaming environments with simulations, going through animations that can allow them to play with concepts and see, oh, what might the effects of this or that be? Playfulness in learning and processing information. So trying to get them to think about things in completely different ways, using video, using analogy, using things like that. And playfulness in our assessment, which I know so many of us have lost. So many of us have lost this because they need to know how to take the test. They need to know what's going to be on the test. And so we test. We test, we test, we test. Right? And actually, Ruben and I were having a conversation about how a lot of, oh no, who was it? Somebody else. We were having a conversation about how a lot of my kids, if I give them an open-ended assignment, they freak out.
Yeah,
They don't know how to do it. Because from day one, they've done worksheets and tests. And so when I say, I literally have an assignment in my psychology class where I tell them, I want you to use your multiple intelligences, so pick one, whatever your highest one was, I give them an MI test every year. Pick your highest intelligence, use it to explain a concept to us. Well, what should that look like? I don't know.
The teachers do.
And then, would this be okay? Yep. Would this be okay? Yep. And the rubric is simply, is the content you're presenting accurate? Did you use the multiple intelligence that you chose? Is that the one you actually ended up using in your presentation? You know, and there could be a couple of other requirements, but it's focused on the content. Were you accurate? I don't care what the format was. And I have had biologists who create an analogy between theories of moral development and spiders building their webs, which is a naturalist intelligence. I was like, dang, it was awesome. I've had interpretive dance performed in my classroom to explain concepts. I have punk rock songs about the development of the frontal lobes that are going to change them. Okay, I mean, it's incredible stuff, but it scares them to death at first. And then at the end of the year, every year, that was the best assignment I've ever done. I've never had anything like that. Okay.
Excuse me.
Please.
Can you elaborate a little bit more playfulness in learning and processing, being the teacher of middle school, that students are changing, but our method of teaching are not that much changing. Can you elaborate or samples if you have?
Yes. So as we're trying to teach and as they're trying to process the information, if they are sitting and listening, they're not playing with it, are they? They're really just absorbing. And I don't know how many of you have heard Willie Wood give his presentation, but he talks about the dance of education and how it needs to be a give and take. That kids can't be critically processing information while they're listening to us. So even you are struggling with this right now. So you'll listen for a second, and then you'll stop listening, and you'll take some notes, and then you're like, oh crap, I missed something. And that's how our brains work. We can present information, and then let them play with it in whatever way we design, or in a way that they come up with. So whether that be, I've actually literally come up with a game for you to play that explains this process, or can you come up with an inventive way to explain this to your neighbor? But letting them kind of create and experiment and explore within those processing moments. Please.
So are you describing like the potential of like play through technology, kind of similar to, if I'm saying it correctly, like Piaget's theory of like, is it constructivism? Where you,
yes.
Right, where you give them blocks and then that's how they learn. It might just build a bunch of stuff. So you're in essence recreating that, but in a digital format.
Exactly.
So we're using our mind instead of our hands.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be in the digital format. And this is the tightrope we walk. We choose when the technology is the right tool for the job. I'm a technologist. I've said that about 86 times now. In my class a couple weeks ago, we were actually learning about Piaget and Vygotsky and the contrasts between those two theories of development. I brought in Duplos, like the big, like 2-year-old kid Legos that are like for chubby hands. And we built towers. And I had them build one tower that was one after another because Piaget is a stage theorist, right? So they had to build it by themselves, one block on top of the other, and see how high they could get it. And then I said, okay, whole class together, build the tower any way you want to. Vygotsky, social constructivism. They built this tower with a big solid base, and then they built it all up together, and they talked about scaffolding and support. And that's play in learning and processing of information. They were literally playing, but by the end they walked away with this completely bizarre understanding of Piaget's and Vygotsky's theory and their relationship. Please, I don't say.
You know what's really cool about that too is that it's also collaboration. Right. It's also processing information through various senses and physical movement, which we know the more they get that information in, the deeper they learn it.
Yeah. So in that particular instance, I walked away from the tech. And I said, okay, I've shown video after video, and I've had them create podcasts about stuff. Now we're going to play with Duplos. And that's a choice that was made for the moment. Right?
So did you decide to like have that the Duplos as a component of your technology lecture or lesson to kind of meet the need of the kinesthetic learner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly right. Okay. Moving on to this last stage, verification, implementation, production. In this stage, we're testing our ideas. So we've come up with all these great ideas and possibilities, but now we've got to test them. We've got to try some of our solutions and see if they work. We've got to actually create something, which is nice. And productivity, being able to actually produce, is extremely important to creativity. It's one thing to be creative in the abstract, to think in creative ways, but it's very frustrating to never then be able to create something. So being creative and creating, now I'm kind of drawing a line between those. And this is a place where the arts can serve us so richly, and where technology can serve us so richly. When we think about technology and productivity, in many cases we can create more faster using technology than we can on our own or with manual resources, right? We can rapidly record ideas. So for example, in that brainstorming session, we can get them out so much quicker in a digital format. We have methods for rapid prototyping and testing. Now, we may not all, as educators, have access to resources that allow for rapid prototyping and testing, but those do exist. And important is this idea of more professional products. When the product is pleasing to look at and seems like an accomplishment, the kids feel proud of it. They take ownership of it. And they're much more attached to it. They're much more empowered by it. These kids that I'm working with at Independence High School, I mean, again, you should have seen his face. This one boy that I just worked with, literally like 2 hours before I got on the plane to come here, we finished his video. And the fact that he had created that, and what was so enjoyable for me was that I went into the classroom and I came back out to see if he was done. And not only was he done, he was showing it to his friend. And that moment where he's like, look what I made. The pride of what he accomplished. Yeah. Would he have shown a 10-page research paper to his buddy? No. So we have these beautiful, fairly professional products that can be shared. And that's another idea. Part of creativity is then hopefully getting our work distributed, getting it out there, sharing it with people. And of course technology can facilitate that to a vast extent. So ending this section of the discussion, I mean, I think we've seen what the tightrope is, that there are certainly resources that can be used, but should they be used all the time? The mix of intuitive and rational factors in any human activity should be remembered. It has to be a mix between the two. Okay, you ready? I'm going to put you to work. Here we go. start with some general principles first, and then move into the model. The first thing, going back to what we've been talking about, we have to make informed choices about both the quantity and the quality of technology in the classroom. It cannot be tech all the time, and it cannot be no tech at all. I have colleagues that I work with who firmly believe it should be no tech at all. Unplug them. They need to learn how to listen to lecture just like I did. Right? That's lovely if you want to revert to the 1700s. Let's go. Let's do it. Okay? It's not happening. I, as a responsible educator, want to make sure that my kids understand how to use these tools, digital literacy. But even more importantly, how much better an educator can I be if I find some of these tools and start bringing them into my classroom? So I do, and I'm not going to mince words with you here. Does it take time? Yeah. To go out there and to find what they are. So it may become a to-do list, that once a week at a certain period of time, you get on the forums and you get on the newsletters and stuff. If you haven't already subscribed to some of the newsletters, there are great ones that go out. There's THE Journal is a great one that talks about technologies being used in the schools. And these are not heady 18-page, peer-reviewed journals. I'm a teacher, this is what I'm doing in my classroom. So there's THE Journal. Ed Week often has some really great ones. And those both can come in digital format too, so you don't even have to kill trees. I'm from Oregon originally. I have tree issues. Yes, ma'am.
What about all the data around PowerPoint, just dropping off engagement, and how we put on our PowerPoint faces that I'm putting on right now, actually?
Right, I know, huge.
And we keep modeling it. We know this, we've all read Tufte. We all know we put on our PowerPoint faces. But why do we continue to ignore our research on PowerPoint?
We ignore the research on PowerPoint because, for the same reasons that we ignore the research on learner-centered teaching. Because this is easy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For the exact same reason. Yep. Yeah, it's killing me that I'm presenting in this format, to be perfectly honest with you. But with 18 hours of preparation time, this is what you get.
I think you could hold the stage down by yourself, I really do.
Oh, thank
Just
you.
what I tell you, I think
Thank
you do great.
you.
I also think that learners are still visual.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
PowerPoints are there to help make that visual connection.
Right.
And it's not that PowerPoint is evil. I mean, yes, there's a lot of research that says it is. I think it's just misused.
Exactly right.
And if you use it correctly, it shouldn't be your only way of presenting. But I do think that it can enhance what you're trying to do when it's appropriate.
Right. I mean, PowerPoint really is simply a framework. And the error that we make is what I've been doing with lots and lots of words on them, right? That's the evil. When we look at dual coding theory, for example, we know that if we use visual and auditory information being presented at the same time, we can retain information up to 50% better than if we present it in a single medium. But that doesn't mean me saying words that are on screen. It means me talking about a concept with a visual representation of it. So PowerPoint can serve to be this great framework, but that's not how we're using it. We're using it for direct instructions.
With Pechakucha, are you familiar with Pechakucha?
No.
Pechakucha is, if you look it up, it's really cool. It's a thing where you have 20 slides, and you have 20 slides and 20 seconds per slide.
Oh.
And what you do is you pick visuals, no text, or very minimal text. And it's a great presentation tool, and I think that when you do 20 slides for 20 seconds, I think it's like a 6-minute. Pechakucha, and it's this national movement. It's called.
Everybody try to Google that, right?
It's Pecha, P-C-H-A-K-U-C-H-A. It comes from a Japanese word.
Cool.
But it's really cool. Yeah, it's a great assignment to give to kids.
Awesome. I love to use Animoto with kids too. She'll do a similar thing. It'll make a 30-second or 60-second video.
Oh, good.
So I'll tell them, okay, you just read a short story, you just read a novel. Pick 20 images that you feel best represent the theme of the novel.
Yeah.
Throw them into Animoto, make a movie, and then you have to explain it.
And then it's about symbolism.
Yeah, it's all about symbolism. Okay, sorry. Okay. We know that, we know that. So there are great educational uses of technology that can enhance thinking, engagement, deep learning. That's what we want, right? No more of the surface stuff. We want the deep learning. We've talked about blogging. We've talked about digital storytelling. Podcasting and vidcasting, again, simple technologies that allow kids to speak about, to use their voice, to teach others, to inform. Okay? Wikis, talk about collaboration, right? Wikis are an opportunity for them to build web pages together, contributing content all together to the same web page. So we can use, for example, the jigsaw model in our classroom, where different kids become experts on different topics, and then they come together on the wiki, and they teach each other there, and they create a page. We actually have people creating their own textbooks this way. Throw out the $100 textbook, research, contribute to the wiki. Now, because it's a social enterprise, we can edit each other. We can say, no, where did you get that fact? Right? And we can fix them up and everything. So it's a very powerful tool.
We've done it this year, not to create a textbook, but we found a lot of my kids in the science class will have trouble reading the lab procedure before they go do it.
Yeah.
So we've just created video manuals for everyone. And you see a lot of teachers do it as well already. That's not a novel idea, but having the kids be part of it,
Yes.
and each kid mastered 1 or 2 labs, it's all the things you're saying already. But
That's awesome.
it was useful.
Awesome. Video conferencing, pulling in experts within the field. I don't have to be the person lecturing about every single topic. I can bring in the authors, I can bring in the scientists, I can bring in the engineers and let them be contributors to my classroom. Simulations and modeling, lots of apps. One of the apps that I'm super fond of right now, if you're a language arts teacher, oh, really? Okay, there's a found poetry app. I'll have to give you the actual name, but it just gives you a bunch of words, and you have to put those together in something meaningful. So kind of a fun one. All right, so in short, we really want to use the resources that are available. We need to use the resources that are available, but we need to use them wisely. All right. We'll get through these little things. Okay. Promote social interaction. That has to happen within the classroom. This is something that the classroom is built for, is social interaction. We spend so much time on lecture. I'm a huge advocate, by the way, of the flipped classroom model. If any of you have heard of that, basically we put instruction, lecture, online for homework, which then enables my classroom to become a collaborative space. They're doing homework, they're doing projects, they're doing group work in class, not as homework. They're watching lectures or listening to lectures or doing readings as homework, so we flip the environment, okay? We can create communities of learners, students working together for common goals and purposes, through group activities, through team-based learning. I'm applauding our PBL sticker on the laptop back there, way to go. Okay, turn to your neighbor types of activities, study groups, etc. But, I should have like a big asterisk caveat thing here. We literally have to teach communication skills. We have to teach active listening, appropriate response, emotional regulation, even emotional recognition when they look at somebody else. That has gone down. So as their IQs have risen, their ability to look at somebody's face and tell what emotion that person is feeling has dropped in the same time period. Please.
To kind of go off of what I was just saying, like in a PowerPoint, the instructor is very blank, but I was reading Mary Allen's, she has a paper on mirror neurons.
Yes.
And how we learn emotional responses through the way we see, like your response is making me want to listen to you because you seem so engaged in it. So it's pulling me into this lecture. And I didn't necessarily come here for the technology aspect as much as the educational, but because of your emotional component and involved in it, it really pulled me into it. So do you think that so many teachers now, I remember in school all the time, they were kind of like, well, I'm not that kind of teacher. But when I would tell them, well, I'm not that kind of student, that's not a response. You know, so they are kind of placing expectations and standards on students that they themselves are not adhering to.
Right.
And then they complain about a disconnect between the learning.
Well, and let me put that one up there. Okay. We do have to remember the introverts, right? There are definitely people, and this is a big issue right now in education. the revolt of the introverts, because we're kind of moving towards more collaboration, more group work, more of this stuff. And the introverts are losing their reflection, and they're losing their intrapersonal interest, and they're having to be forced out of their comfort zones. Now, there are a lot of teachers who are introverts. If you're one of those teachers who, like me, stands up and kind of pours it all out on the floor, and then you get to your hotel room and collapse, not from the physical exertion, but from the emotional exertion, from giving it all, right? And I feel like you may be a hillbilly. You may be an introvert, right? If you feel that complete emotional exhaustion at the end. Whereas extroverts feed off of the energy and emotion of others and are energized by that experience. So there are teachers that are like that. And what we can do, again, I'm going to throw tightropes in here all the time. We've got a balance between reflective intrapersonal activities and the community of learners, the collaboration, the communication, discussion, balance those out. But if I'm not a super hyper-emotional teacher, I can supplement my instruction with the groups, right? And that can help me go for it. Please.
As we've stopped teaching drama and speech,
Ah.
and as it's progressed that a student cannot hear their own voice in space for hours and days at a time, I think this is a skill that can be taught.
Yes.
And I think that it's a skill that people shouldn't feel like they just poured it all out, or I'm not a charismatic teacher, that's not who I am. When what we're talking about with the mirror neurons firing is just empathy, what happens between us right now. If I look at you and you look at me, and we're connected in time and space. And I think reading the emotions and all these things, and one of the greatest gifts that the arts bring to the table is this empathic connection, which certainly we need more of.
I wholeheartedly agree. And there's actually a study out right, well, I don't know if it's a study, but a very, very strong suggestion that every teacher be required to take an acting class.
Absolutely.
Amen. Amen. All over. All right. We got to emphasize our active learning. No more of this passive sitting around, letting them use their strengths, but encouraging them to develop new strengths. Howard Gardner is the first person to say that his theory is not about putting people in a box. It's about showing them their strengths and their potentials. Same with Carol Dweck, fixed mindset versus growth mindset. People with a growth mindset who understand they can change and learn actually achieve more and do more with their lives. But we have to engage them in the learning to do that. And we can do that with technology, and we can do it without. And then we must be requiring reflection. And this is a huge gaping hole in our instruction right now. Okay. We need to incorporate unplugged time. I mean, we jokingly talked about the tech breaks at the beginning of this session. And now let's talk about the tech breaks in a very different context. A time when they are unplugged. That does need to exist as well. I have actually had to work on this. Okay? I speak fast. Have you noticed? I talk a little fast. My poor students who are English language learners come up to me every semester, please can you slow down? So I've had to work on this not just because I talk fast, but because I'm an interpersonal learner. I learn through discussion with others. And so I forget to stop and pause and allow for reflection. So that's something we need to build into our instruction. Things like think, pair, share, do that very quietly and seamlessly, because I can say something like, all right, I'm setting the timer. I want you to think about this issue for 2 minutes before you can turn and talk to your neighbor. And they can either think in their heads or you can have them write it down. Like 7th graders, sometimes they need direction in the reflective period. But that then gives them permission to have 2 minutes of quiet where they're thinking about things. Giving really good application questions about content. I do that on all of my study guides. So within my classes, I have study guides built in with the key terms that I want them to get, just the basic scaffolding thing. But at the end of all of them are application-oriented questions. What does this look like in your life? How are you going to use this in the future to prompt that reflection? we're going to talk about WebQuest as a model of instruction that helps us walk this tightrope. This model of instruction is old. 1995, it's been around for almost 20 years. So it's nothing new. But it's not something a lot of us have heard of, and especially not in this context of fostering creativity in our classrooms. But it's an outstanding vehicle. If you want the whole story on WebQuest, that's the web address. The basic idea is that it's an inquiry-based lesson or unit format. So in other words, it centers around questions and problems. Questions and problems beg for answers and solutions. And so right there we've got the start for creativity. As opposed to, here are facts I'm teaching you. We're saying, what can we do about this? Or who was this person? And why was he or she important? So we're starting with questions rather than answers. Now in a WebQuest, what we generally do is have the majority of resources and activities take place online. But notice I'm saying majority, and I'm even going to use that word loosely. Okay? Really what it is a structured model, a framework for engaging students in inquiry using tech. That's what it is. It's a framework, it's a guidance piece. So if you want to look and find, there are thousands and thousands of WebQuests out there. Some of them are crummy and some of them are really good. Again, at the main webquest.org site, they actually have an excellent matrix where you can go in and choose them by grade level, by subject, etc. And those have all been kind of reviewed. And then this other one is kind of a fun one. They've got several at different grade levels to kind of give you a look at what they might be. I'm going to show some pieces of examples today. There's no perfect WebQuest. It's about your core and it's about your kids. And it's about the resources that you have available. So let's get into the actual model. Every WebQuest has 5 components to it. Some people would say 6. And on a diagram I'll show here later, there's a 6th, which is the teacher page. And the teacher page simply has the core curriculum. Everything is based on the core, right? We don't want to just teach whatever we do like today, which is too bad. Yeah. But, so the core curriculum is there, advice for teachers, resources, like worksheets and stuff. So I'm not mentioning that today. That's it. That's all you get on teacher page. All right, so the first part is the introduction, always. And in the introduction, we present the authentic problem or question. Notice authentic. We want it to be real world. We want it to be something that is relevant to the kids, to their lives. Sometimes we're using authentic. Okay, sometimes we make up the scenario and we're like, a spaceship has just landed on your planet, and we make up scenarios. Which is fun, right? It allows the kids to put themselves into this cool, fun context, and we love it, and it's great. That's fine. But generally, we're going with something that's authentic. The next part is a task, and this is where we give them the overview of what they'll be doing. So it's, you'll be doing internet research, and then you're going to be creating something, whatever your end product is. And a WebQuest, the focus of the WebQuest is the creation of a product. This is where they get to go crazy and be creative and come up with amazing things. So that product may be a poem, that product may be a marketing ad, that product may be a campaign for micro-lending. I mean, it could be anything that we want it to be. Then the big work begins when we have the process. And I'm going to come back through all of these and have you work on these for a bit. In the process, we deliver the organized resources. So all of the web links, videos we want them to watch, scaffolds and supports. So if we need guided note-taking or worksheets or anything like that, we will build these in. So this is really the nitty-gritty step-by-step of what they're going through. Then we have the evaluation piece. This is, okay, this is how what you're doing is going to be graded. I hate grades. Okay. All right. And then the conclusion. Never skip the conclusion. Some people think it's not necessary. But in the conclusion, we model reflection, right? So in the conclusion, we're saying, this is what you learned and why it's so important. This is what you've achieved. And this is where we also encourage them to extend it and to reflect on their own. So let's start with the introduction. Again, we're presenting the scenario, the problem, the question that they'll be working through. And the complexity of this is going to vary, of course, by grade level. So I'm going to show you a couple of different examples. Here's a second grade introduction. There's not a question, there's not a major problem to be solved in this one. The reading level's not very high of these students, so we kept it very simple. Chart, oh, it's about charts. That's it, right? Just to entice their excitement. Here's a 5th grade introduction. Have you ever wondered what a marine biologist does? In this simulation, you will be part of a group of marine biologists who are experts on intertidal zones. Your expertise is needed by the city of San Diego to assist the thousands of tourists who visit the city and its tide pool areas each year. How would you feel as a 5th grader? Your expertise is needed. That's quite exciting. My daughter would come home and say, Mom, my expertise is needed. Oh, crap. All right, and now we're getting up into junior high and high school and the Rock the Boat campaign. I love this introduction with every fiber of my being. Okay, bothered by curfew, can't find a place to skateboard, frustrated with censorship, who's controlling your life? Know your rights, get involved, decisions are made by adults every day, etc. So the scenario here is that they are working with MTV, the channel that has no music on it, to create ads, and this is the coolest idea I've ever heard in my life, connecting what's going on in their lives with issues that stem from the Bill of Rights. So they have to learn about the Bill of Rights. So obviously on the plate right now is gun control, right? It's everywhere, 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 everywhere in discussion. And so that may be something that the kids would then go in and research. They first learn about the Bill of Rights and what that contains. Okay, now what issues in our lives are relevant to the Bill of Rights? And how should we vote on those issues? And then they're going to make commercials about it. All right, putting you to work. Think about something that you teach your kids. And don't worry, I call my college students kids. Even though I teach it at like a open enrollment college, and so half of my kids are older than me. All right. What topic from your curriculum might be best learned through inquiry and creation of a creative product? What's the question or the scenario that you could ask? We're going to take a few minutes on this. You are welcome to work in partnerships or by yourselves, but this is the big question of the day. What topic would you teach this way?
What would you like to do? Yeah.
Oh, that was convenient. Somebody, I like it. That was perfect. Somebody clicked the glass. It's time to move on. I love it. All right. So this is something, hopefully you got one idea that you can write down of something that you maybe have been using direct instruction for, maybe been lecturing about, but can turn it into inquiry. I am moving this way myself on something that's been a major component of my course for a long time. I do a service learning component where they go out and they aid in classrooms, and I always just have them answer my questions about it. And I want to turn this into them asking their own questions about it. And so I'm moving in this direction myself on something that's very, very major. I've done this quite a bit with smaller pieces and even with units of instruction. But this is a major semester-long project, so I'm quite excited about it. All right, then you move on to the task. And again, this is where you kind of provide an overview of what they're going to be doing. Basically, we're setting up that schema, saying, okay, so big picture, this is what we're going to be doing on this particular activity. So what you think of through this is what types of tasks would both facilitate learning and promote creativity as they're going through the WebQuest. Now, I want to remind you that whatever these outputs are, they don't all have to be digital. So this is a framework, and we're using resources. For example, if I ask the question in my introduction, in a former life I was also a dance teacher. So if I ask my students, how can dance be used to express the problems in the world? As a piece of inquiry. And if I ask that to 8th grade students, they're going to go, I don't know. And so then I take them online. And I show them beautiful pieces in which emotion and pain and travesty are expressed. And hunger. And all of these issues. And then we talk about the choreographic process, and I send them to some websites that give them resources on how we choreograph and how we incorporate meaning into our pieces. And then I'm going to take them through an exercise where they find emotion in their bodies, and they move that emotion. That's an in-class piece. That's not taking place online, right? And their final piece of work is a composition, is a dance, a piece of choreography that they're performing. And we may video that, and probably darn well better video that because I want them to be able to see what they've done. But it's the choreography that matters. So we're walking that tightrope throughout this process as we're saying, how can we leverage the tools that are available but maintain the skills and the connections and the collaboration throughout as well. So the task just gives us the basic overview. I'll give you some examples. These are the same web quests that you saw earlier so that you can kind of see how they flow from one to the next. So the introduction was just sharks are cool. Now you and your partner have been hired by SeaWorld to study sharks and write a commercial or adventure story. So they have to learn what they are and then write a tale about sharks. So it's very similar to what we saw with the snake video that we watched earlier. For this one, they're going to be researching intertidal zones and the specimens that they can generally find there, and then they're going to be creating a brochure. So not super high tech in this case, but that's their final product. And then in this one, they're analyzing the Bill of Rights, they're identifying issues, they're examining voting records. It's really complex. So this is what gives you the overview of what they're going to be doing. Okay? So considering the topic you were just thinking about, how might your students use technology? We're in the preparation stage of creativity here. Okay? How might they use technology to learn more about your topic, to engage in collaboration, to generate some possible solutions and ideas and things, to create something? Can you think of resources? Or can you think of resources you're going to need? So are there apps out there? Are there websites out there? Are there videos that you know of? Or are there things that you're going to need? Take just a couple minutes to write down some thoughts on that. What resources would you need, or what resources do you already know about?
She mentioned just a while ago that dance and education. Do you know the author of that? She mentioned it, and I just, she used the idea that a given time, I thought she said, and I was writing it down. I am. Good for you. I'm from Little Rock. Oh, okay. Work for government and business. Are you kidding? Oh, you might have to ask her. Yeah, well, I asked her. And I understood. Is there a word off the word that I understood? Because I wrote it down. There's one by March. question about the book, the dance of education.
I don't know if there's an actual book. Really what talks about it. But I don't know if it's an actual book. Yeah. Really is there, and I think we have a book. All right, folks, I'm gonna have to rein you in so that we can finish up. Now, the task and then moving into the process is kind of the hardest part. I think it's not too difficult for us to come up with a scenario or a question. I mean, to me, this is one of those beautiful moments in education where I, as a teacher, get to be creative and come up with a cool scenarios or something to engage my kids with. Finding the resources, yeah, it's harder. This is where our legwork comes in. And I will tell you there's a trade-off here. Because I do instructional design in advance. And then when my class convenes, I get to walk around and facilitate their efforts and talk with them and help them. So it does take more prior planning. I've got to go out and find the websites. I've got to go out and find the videos. I've got to plan it all out. But then when the days of instruction actually come, I'm not wasting my time up front. I'm down there with them where I want to be, right? So that's the trade-off that we're making, and I'm going to be very frank and honest about that. It does take time to find the resources. As we get into the process section, I'm not going to make you do this because this will take you several hours. This is where we really go through step by step. We hold their hands and walk them through this process. We incorporate technologies where it makes sense to incorporate technologies. We back them out when it doesn't. There are web quests that take 20 minutes to complete. There are web quests that take 20 days to complete and longer. There are web quests that take an entire semester to complete. In fact, this last summer when I was teaching my technology integration class for my kids, I made the entire thing a web quest. The entire class was a web quest. So the scenario that I presented to my students was that they had just been hired at Cox High School. So exciting. And they were there at their new teacher induction, and this was their technology training workshop that they were involved in over the next 7 weeks. And so we started them off, and I flipped the classroom. I gave them videos that they watched on how to make their own websites and everything. So they were all like new teachers getting to build their websites. And then I announced, ta-da! There's been an earthquake. Our brand new school has been damaged. We're not going to be able to start on time. You're going to have to put a unit online. And their jaws fell to the floor, and there was vast amounts of slobber pouring. Yeah, it terrified them. So I basically said, you've got to put an entire unit online. Here are some parameters, because the district wants us to have outcomes, but you've got to get it done. Here are the resources you need. And then it walked them through, okay, here's how you find resources. Here's how you build the pages. Here's how you do all of these different pieces. So my entire class was one web quest. So it can really vary. Now that allowed me to have some days that were completely online, some days where they were working together with other teachers in their content area, some days where they could work alone and I could come and help them. And so we really mixed when technology was going to be used and when we were going to be using face-to-face models. I will encourage you, particularly with today's students, that wherever possible, try to find more interactive web-based or any other technological interventions. It's tempting to find 18 really long websites that explain the concept really well. And then we basically just lecture to them in a different format, right? So the point of using the technology piece woven into this web quest is that now they're using the web for what it's for the interaction and the engagement and the visual involvement that they're not going to get from lengthy pieces of text or from lecture. Okay? So wherever possible, try to find those animations and videos and games and apps and things like that that can help them to really engage. There we go. Now, even built into the WebQuest model is a very strong emphasis on collaboration, group work, and roles. That is built into WebQuest. It was never intended to be an isolationist activity where people just sit online by themselves. So really consider doing things like jigsaw and role assignment and choice, choose your own adventure options. So in other words, we're learning about the people that follow the Oregon Trail. Do you want to be a miner, or do you want to be a farmer? Or they can choose a role and then investigate why those people would have been on the Oregon Trail, what life was like for them. So. Then we get into the evaluation piece, and we know this is hard, but we mentioned it earlier. This is where we're going to provide guidelines and rubrics, but we've got another tightrope here. How do we give the guidelines and the rubrics and keep the creativity? So again, make sure that your rubrics are focused on the content rather than the format. Also, I encourage you to be open to choices. What I call cafeteria-style grading is another option. You've probably heard of that before too. So rather than having one assignment that everybody has to complete, with the cafeteria-style grading, they can choose from a menu of options. Oh, I want to write a story, and I want to record this, and I want to, so they can pick things that are equivalent weights. That's another fun one that allows them to express their creativity and personality. And then in the conclusion, we summarize what was learned and accomplished, and we ask our reflective questions. Again, I will make this available online for you, so.
Give us your web stuff.
Yes.
Put it up or no?
Oh, it's at the very, very end.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yes. This is the conclusion of the high school WebQuest. I'm going to read it to you. I don't know how well you can see back in the back. The Bill of Rights is over 200 years old. This old document is a powerful piece of paper. What those men wrote so many years ago impacts our daily lives. Do you see how this teacher is modeling reflection? How people live right now is linked to that document. Those rights are your rights. The stand you take today will affect the rest of your life and the lives of your children. Now we're prompting extension. Where do you take this now? Think about the message you have created. Politicians are hired by voters. Let them know who you are and what you want. Your continued involvement, so we're prompting for future activity again, can affect the interpretation of the Bill of Rights and your future. Keep watch over your government representatives and voice your opinions. Stay involved. Rock the vote. Nice. All right. I'm going to end with this quote from a completely random person online. Because I love technology so much. This woman is from India. She's a bit of a vagabond. She travels, she lives, and this is a profound insight. In some ways, technology does hinder creativity and original thought, especially in those incubation and inspiration periods. And the only way to counter it is to balance out what new technology has to offer with what the old school has taught us. Nothing beats the power of human thought. No amount of search, synthesis, and rehash has the ability to create new content. In the end, you need to use your brain. All right. That's it, and I think I've wasted every single second and then some time. My website has been horribly neglected due to my busy schedule, but I will put these on the minute we're done here so that you can at least get those. It's not pretty though.
So thanks to Susie and everyone for attending this, and especially Susie for coming up with this in a day and a half. It was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for your participation. And by all means, if you have questions, I'm not in a hurry.
So, I think you're in the same line where you're training students, college students, to become teachers. And so we were just talking about this. The challenge that I see with my students is I'm trying to bring in a great creative ideas. My students, thank you very much. They love to and they walk out that classroom and how, when they see the picture, open up support. Thank you.
Other than that, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, so,
Where's the, they already there? I think, yeah. Would you like to speak?